Talofa lava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susanna Suisuiki. Coming up.
And we don't want this industry to happen. And we need people to understand that we are ocean people.
Hawaii bans seabed mining also.
You just cannot put anything out on air. You really need to know what you are doing.
A Pacific media conference addresses critical issues facing regional reporters, and
a lot of Samoans, especially the ones that live in Samoa, don't actually know much about sailing as a sport.
We meet the Samoan sailor who's setting off for the Olympics. Hawaii has banned seabed mining, signing the new law into effect this week on Tuesday morning. Its government says the move will safeguard Hawaii's marine ecosystem for the foreseeable future, protecting over 3,000 square miles of the Pacific Ocean. Tiana Haxton reports.
The new legislation prohibits the extraction and removal of minerals in state waters and bans issuing permits associated with seabed mining activity. Introduced by Senator Chris Lee, this bill complements a law passed last year which allows Hawaii to deny entry to any marine vessel involved in seabed mining activities. Lee says this is a precautionary measure as the environmental impacts of seabed mining are not yet clear.
The impact that can have on the broader ocean and species and habitat is simply unknown. But we do know that that impact is real and the risk is real. And we take action while we can to protect our natural resources, to protect our oceans, and ultimately to protect the planet we live on.
Additionally, Lee says the seabed minerals industry is moving too fast and they are being cautious.
Right now, the conversation appears to be driven largely by an industry that is very intent, I think, on racing to capture part of the market and getting as much out of it as they can, which means an exploitation of the resource in our oceans in ways that we simply can't properly manage, properly vet, and with science that we simply don't yet have. So I think we're putting on the brakes.
Local environmental organisations say the ban is a big step in the right direction. Brittany Kamai of long-time campaigners A'ole or No Deep-Sea Mining says this is a positive example for the Pacific region.
And so saying that from Hawaii is very powerful, right? Like, no, we don't want this ship coming into our waters, and we don't want this industry to happen. And we need people to understand that we are ocean people. It just feels like at the beginning of a song where the drum beat is just like everyone's just coming into a resonance together.
An Indigenous Hawaiian elder is calling for the rest of the Pacific to follow suit and take a united stand against seabed mining. Solomon Kaho'ohalahala says while each nation legally reserves the right in making their own decisions, leaders need to consider the potential impacts mining can have on neighbouring islands.
The ocean knows no boundaries. You cannot draw a line on the ocean and say that what I do on one side of the line will not impact the other side. A nation's decisions to move ahead has to know that they're going to impact not just themselves, but they're going to impact all of us.
The new bill was signed into law this morning by Hawaii Governor Josh Green. This is following a letter sent in June by 12 members of the US Congress to President Joe Biden, urging for a moratorium on deep-sea mining ahead of the International Seabed Authority meeting this month.
The second round of the French national snap elections are now done, and for New Caledonia, one of the two seats is now held by a pro-independence candidate, signalling a potential setback for the pro-French camp. Meanwhile, in French Polynesia, the pro-independence party has lost in 2 of the 3 constituencies. Koroi Hawkins spoke with Patrick de Cloyter on our French Pacific desk about the results.
Thank you, Thomas Patrick, for story to me back more. So, what were the results of the French snap elections in the French Pacific territories?
Well, last week I was saying that the most likely scenario for New Caledonia would be one pro-France MP and the other pro-independence. And this is what happened. Some say it was a surprise. I still think this was likely to happen because more than ever, politics in New Caledonia is polarized block to block. especially after the last 2 months of riots and violence. I think voters took the opportunity of these national elections to vent their frustrations, their anger, their sadness, and vote a little bit as if it was some kind of a referendum on whether New Caledonia should remain French or be independent. And looking at the candidates from each side, well, they were likely to get full support from their respective supporters. In fact, the participation rate was as high as 71%. For the loyalists, pro-France, Nicolas Metzdorf managed to get re-elected and retain his seat. But on the pro-independence side, one candidate also scored really well, mainly because of his character and his history. He ended up winning the second seat in the French Parliament. This man is Emmanuel Tjibaou, the son of the late Jean-Marie Tjibaou. He was the man who 36 years ago signed the Matignon peace agreement with French PM, at the time socialist Michel Rocard, and pro-France leader at the time too, Jacques Lafleur. That agreement was mainly designed to end half a decade of a quasi-civil war in New Caledonia. So 36 years later, his son is entering politics with big shoes to fill. His father, a moderate pro-independence leader of the FLNKS, was in fact murdered in 1989 by a radical member of the pro-independence movement. So this is also the first time in almost 40 years that the indigenous pro-independence Kanak movement is represented at the French National Assembly. So it's a very symbolic election for someone who has just entered politics at 47, being himself a moderate, even though he was contesting on behalf of the Union Caledonienne, which is the more radical component of the FLNKS. So in New Caledonia, we now have a pro-independence but rather moderate new MP, Tjibaou, whose election is even welcomed by the pro-French group because they say he is a man at least they can talk to, not a radical, so there could be a glimmer of light and hope at the end of the tunnel. And by the way, this is what Tjibaou said on Sunday night during the post-election debrief on public TV, New Caledonia La Première.
This is proof that democracy is still alive and kicking in this country. Then I'm also impressed by the situation in which our country is plunged today. These are not acceptable conditions. We see everything that's happening. We have to gain perspective, even if it's difficult. And then our country is also sinking into an economic crisis. So it's complicated to project ourselves with our feet tied to this weight dragging us underwater. This situation is dramatic. We must restore the conditions for dialogue. It's not acceptable to live in a country where our leaders said we could walk together. There is a kind of dichotomy, a widening gap. And yet, I think we must engage in the future, take responsibility, and then restore the country. It is our country. And this electoral campaign has shown us that we all still believe that what our fathers started when they signed 2 political agreements is still possible. So it's a cry for help. It's a cry for hope.
Now, not forgetting the other side of the Pacific in French Polynesia, as opposed to New Caledonia with a victory for the pro-independence parties, in French Polynesia, for the pro-independence Tavini Huira-Atira, it's a setback. The Tavini has lost 2 of the 3 seats that he had won at the previous general elections 2 years ago, and that's because mainly the pro-France party, who were divided as an opposition force, finally decided to form an alliance to contest those national elections as a united platform. And it paid. So for French Polynesia, for the 3 national constituencies, there's only one left on the pro-independence movement, and the other 2 are now held by what people call there the pro-autonomy parties.
What are the challenges for newsrooms in the Pacific? A Pacific International Media Conference, which has ended in Fiji, looked at some of the thorny issues facing the industry, but also some of the opportunities. Moira Tuilei-Patela was there and has this report. The three-day conference brought together people from the media industry, academics, civil society and other interested parties. Associate Professor Shailendra Singh, one of the organisers of the conference, says there were a lot of in-depth discussions because it's a critical time for media in the Pacific region.
Mainly for two reasons. The digital disruption, as we know, has siphoned off huge amounts of advertising revenue from the media industry and mainstream media, as well as COVID-19, which worsened the situation. And I think most media organizations are struggling to survive.
This is the first conference of its kind in Fiji in 20 years. The lifting of the draconian media decree in 2023, which had been hanging over the heads of the Fiji media industry since 2010, has created an environment that no longer operates in fear. Here's Dr. David Roby, publisher and editor of the Asia Pacific Report.
It's a sort of conference that has been long lacking in Fiji, really a good reflection on the media and the influences that at work and some of the challenges that we're facing in the media.
He says the conference didn't shy away from challenges facing reporters in the region.
There were some amazing panels, I mean, like the one on sexual harassment and so on that we had was one of the, well, I'd say by far the best I've experienced anywhere in any country. Really frank and open discussions, and also I think the way the climate's addressed and so on, and then stress and burnout and so on. So many really strong issues came up at this conference.
Young reporters and journalism students from the University of the South Pacific, the USP, also attended. Shivali Shritika finished her studies and is working in various newsrooms in Suva to gain some experience in the industry. She says one thing she wants to see in newsrooms is more training for young reporters.
I think there should be more of a learning space, which I think also it lacks, the learning space. So in the newsrooms, what I have experienced, that a journalist will be so into their work that even if you go and approach them, that just, for a couple of minutes you need to discuss something or you need to get an idea, because you just cannot put anything out on air. You really need to know what you are doing.
Shivali Sritika says this needs to change, otherwise more young reporters will leave the industry. For Kaneta Namimato, a third-year journalism student, the conference reinforced why he should be a journalist and in Fiji.
I think I can contribute more to Fiji, like at least start, because I'm from Banaban descent. So yeah, I want to represent my people from Rambi as well as from Banaba as well.
Associate Professor Shailendra Singh, who is also one of the coordinators of the journalism course at the USP, says the papers tabled and some of the discussions that took place will be published in the Pacific Journalism Review.
It was really important to have a discussion from people from around the Pacific region and beyond about what is happening and what some of the possible solutions might be.
He says he hopes the delegates who attended the conference listened and learned and can apply that somehow in the work they are doing. Eroni Leilua is Samoa's solitary sailing representative at the upcoming Paris Olympics this month. Having grown up in Samoa and fallen in love with sailing at the age of 8, he remembers there weren't many other Samoans involved in the sport. Paris will be Eroni's second time representing Samoa at the Olympics, and he wants to create more pathways for the next generation of Samoan sailors. Grace Fiava'ai spoke with Eroni Leilua and began by asking which part of Samoa he calls home.
So I grew up in Samoa, in Waiwaseuta, where my dad's family's from, originally hailing from Waiala, in Upolu and Fusi in Savaii. And then my mum is born and raised in New Zealand. She grew up in Dunedin. But yeah, we grew up in Samoa. We're born here and moved straight over to Samoa and did primary school and kindergarten over there. And kind of that's where the sailing began down at Apia Yacht Club.
Lord, that's awesome. Great villages. I think that's cool. You know how your mum is from, the deep South Island, and you then kind of shifted to the South Pacific in Samoa. When you're out at sea, can you tell me your thoughts and what you're thinking about when you're out there?
The beauty about sailing is being out on the water, you kind of escape reality in a way. You can kind of forget about, things that are going on at work, and then just really focus on the small things, and the skills and stuff that you need to focus on when you're out training. And it also puts a bit of perspective onto it, especially coming from Samoa and of, Pacific heritage and where our ancestors have come from as well, where you kind of reflect back to, how privileged you are to be able to, do it as a sport and race to live back in the day and to voyage around. It's quite a full circle moment, I guess. And so one of my biggest goals from competing and going through it myself is to try and set something up for future sailors of the Pacific and Samoa that, they'll have some sort of funding there available so that they don't have to go through the same struggles and can focus more on the sailing as opposed to the funding.
What are some of the obstacles that you have faced? Funding
and just being able to allocate the time and hours on the water that I would like to, just due to holding down like a full-time job and a family as well. So it's a bit of a balancing game, but hugely enjoyable and pretty proud to be able to do it again in Paris this year.
Now, I noticed that we don't have much of a representation in the sport of sailing, especially at the Olympics this year. Can you tell me as to why that might be?
A lot of Samoans, especially the ones that live in Samoa, don't actually know much about sailing as a sport, which is quite interesting. And probably another reason why we don't see more involved is even when we lived there, we weren't aware that we had a sailing club until Mum took us down. So that exposure and that understanding that sailing is a sport and that it is available in Samoa is probably one of the biggest of the sport growing. But again, it's one of my big longer-term goals is to really boost that sailing scene and see more numbers coming through the system.
How would you implement that and what does that look like?
School programs is what we're kind of wanting to target, and just around water safety and confidence in the water, because as surrounded as we are by the ocean, living in Samoa and in the islands, there's not actually a lot of islanders that can actually swim. The water safety or the knowledge of safety around water is quite low, and the understanding of currents and weather systems and stuff, which just contribute to water sports, is highly regarded as other countries, even though we live around the water.
After this year's Olympics, are you looking to maybe go to the next Olympics? What is that looking like for you?
We'll see how this games go. I'd be very keen to do the next one in LA, and that's kind of the goal, but we just got to see it.
Eroni, do you have any advice for the young and up-and-coming generation of today wanting to get into the sport?
Just give it a go or reach out. Just be open-minded to learn about the sport and understand that it's a very different sport to what many are used to. And I think a lot of kids will be surprised at how much they actually will enjoy it if they tried it. Which, a boat is essentially a vehicle at the age of 8 and, have no parents looking over your shoulders, or, you'd be able to get some independence in this vessel and, go fast and really learn about the environment, which was awesome. And as an 8-year-old boy, being put into a boat by yourself is pretty exciting.
That's Pacific Waves for today. To listen back, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tofa sui fua.